Much better. Okay. Now we get into the fun part that everybody wants to say. Before, we're going to have microphones that will be given to the people that have questions. But I got one question from my friend and buddy by email, and that's Jeff Clear. Jeff and I have known each other for many years, play poker. And Jeff says, I'm not sure, what is SAISSA going to do to provide decent access to our beaches? We all know that there's an access issue to our beaches. We all know that there's not enough accesses to the beach. We know that. And the AIPCA knows that, as was discussed at their meeting on Friday. And if Tom wants to give us a half an hour report on what they're talking about, he's certainly willing and capable of doing that, although we don't think that he wants to do that at this point in time. But the point that I'm trying to make is that this is an AIPCA issue. This is a sanctuary issue. This is a, excuse me, this is a retreat issue. This is not, unfortunately or fortunately, it is not a SAISSA issue. We are in the business of protecting the market value of your property by restoring the beach when necessary. Our charter does not allow us to basically do anything else. And that's why I made you to please take a look at the purpose of what SAISSA is all about. So, while I personally do support a robust access to the beach, because I hope everybody gets to go on our fantastic beach, our goal is to maintain the market value of the properties and not provide for access to the beaches. So that's the first question. That's my answer. Our answer, not mine. Answer. So now I'm going to call on Jeff to ask even more questions as it relates to access on the beach. Jeff, nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
We need a microphone.
Thank you, sir. My name is Jeff Clear. I live at 5 Juniper Court. Drew, I'd like to thank you and all your associates for the fantastic work that you do on our behalf. Certainly evidenced today, but I know you've worked hours and hours and will work hours and hours. So thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Secondly, I'd like to say that I am absolutely 100% in favor of beach renourishment. And now, I think your presentation on 2021 is compelling. However, I'd like to offer a slightly different perspective on what you just stated. Just my hearing aid. First of all, I looked closely at the purpose slide that you put up at the very beginning, and it includes the following words: enhance the beach system. I choose to interpret those words to mean, and it could include, I know this is not what you just said, but it could include support. Notice I don't say lead or broker or anything like that, simply support the community's efforts to improve beach access. So my specific question is, will you and your SAISSA associates, in the best interests of our community, support, actively and officially support, the efforts of others, especially the AIPCA board, as they seek to develop ways to improve beach access? And if called upon, will you provide reasonable assistance to those efforts?
Oh, thank you, Jeff. The last part, if called upon, provide reasonable assistance. It's your money. It's not my money. And we assess you. We allocate that $1.5 million to enhance and build the beach to what we think is appropriate level. So it's your money. And I don't know what you want me to do with your money other than to restore the beach. If you want me to recommend to our board that we consider involving that money to do other things. As far as support, I personally, and I think, I'm not sure this is what the county wants us to do, because you're going to remember, we're the project manager for the county. I don't know if the county wants me to deviate from the charter to start getting into areas where I don't think we should be in. So I'm not sure that the county would want me to do this. And second of all, I haven't talked to the board, but I personally, and I think everybody, if you talk to them, would support the fact that we need more access to the beach. So, you know, if I take my SAISSA hat off, yes, I do certainly support that and would do whatever I can outside of SAISSA. But I'm just a little concerned that the resources of SAISSA should not be devoted to dealing with the access to the beach. But, you know, I'll tell you what I'll do. At the next board meeting, I'll run it by everybody and see what they say.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, now, Bill, all these hands that are going up, I need you. Oh, you're there with a mic? Okay.
Yes.
So let's go. We have one over here. There was one. You can ask me the question. I'll get it to the right person. Is that Ron?
Yes.
It is Ron. Hi, Ron. Ron needs a microphone.
Thank you, Drew.
You're welcome, Ron.
Beach access is one issue. I submit that your purpose here is having a beach to which to have access.
Nicely said. Thank you.
Two questions. How's that? Firstly, for Dr. Browder, and probably both, and they're very different questions. Your perspective went back to 1984, and we saw the consequences of beach erosion. This has been occurring for centuries. Do we have any view of what this island looked like 100, 200, 300 years ago on the south end to get a feel for what we can expect from this type of erosion? Secondly, you saw how you gave us an indication of how effective mechanical intervention was at the state park by putting in a spine of some type. Is that something we should consider in the future to slow down the erosion and the implications of having to renourish?
Okay. Al, you want to take those? I don't know where you are, but.
To answer the first question, there is a historical record that runs back probably 150 years with reasonably accurate surveys, and you get an indication of the conditions of the beach. Amelia Island itself used to extend farther south than it does today into Nassau Sound. Nassau Sound was located roughly where it is today, but the map history gives us indication of cyclical erosion and accretion at the south end of the island. With the introduction of the structures that were placed in 0405, we've halted some of that fluctuation and stabilized the island. So in the near to intermediate term, 50 to 100 years, the position of the island will stay roughly where it is, but it still has the tendency to want to erode. In an era of rising seas, obviously we're fighting on that end versus getting any help on the issue of sea level changes. So there's no reasonable expectation for a rapid increase in the erosion rate or really a rapid decrease in the erosion rate. The beaches on the ocean front, to a certain extent, can keep up with sea level rise up to a certain degree. It'll be areas like this in the back where your sea level rise will catch you. But in terms of the beach nourishment program, any dramatic change in the game plan going forward, we wouldn't envision would come up. To get to your second question about additional structural stabilization, yes, you can pursue additional structural stabilization farther up the beach. This is not the first time this question has come up. When feasibility studies are done to determine what's the best beach management plan, doing nothing, nourishing the beach, or intervening with structures of various forms is always part of the discussion. Extending the breakwaters would be, or adding groins to the beach is a certain question that you can evaluate economically. You can also try to evaluate it aesthetically or environmentally. Some of the structural alternatives that we can use near the inlet, for example, we would not be allowed to use on the open coast for problems of intervention with nesting sea turtles, shorebirds, things of that nature. But yes, you can look at all sorts of alternatives to any extent. Again, just keeping in mind that just because you want to do something one particular way, you may not get permits to do it. Structural intervention moving northward up the beach becomes more and more expensive. One, because you need more and more and more structures. but two, you're also building in deeper water, structures get bigger and more expensive. So it becomes a bit of an economic issue. At this point, as long as sand is reasonably available at the inlet or wherever we may find it, probably beach nourishment remains your most economical alternative.
We have oh, yes, I'm sorry. Buddy wants to say something? It's working, I think, buddy. I know.
I should share this with them.
No, Norm, I was not here 150 years ago. But I do want to say that part of our success with the Navy, with the Corps, has been because of a study done in 1970 by a young engineer named Eric Olson. It's when I first met him. And what he found that under Chapter 111 of the federal statutes, that if the Corps has something they've created that becomes deteriorated and then causes more erosion, and so what they did is they built the jetties back in the 1800s. I wasn't there. And they have let them deteriorate. What they did is they put logs in the ground and then put rocks in the middle of that. And then, of course, over time, the logs deteriorated and the rocks fell down. So the current then makes a sharp right turn and comes and eats away at the north end. And we have proved to the Corps over time it also contributes to the south end erosion as well. Now, when we're dealing with the Navy, they and the Corps spent $5 million to prove that we were wrong, because we said that when they start dredging Kings Bay, they're going to starve us and steal our sand, because they were going to throw it out in the ocean. They weren't going to put it on the shore, and that's when we got embroiled with the Navy. In fact, I drafted a lawsuit, went to the Secretary of the Navy and said, we're going to do this, we're going to sue you if you don't help us out with this. And so after lots of negotiation, they agreed that we are indeed right and they're wrong, because their 5 million, 28 volume study had the wrong benchmark. They started at the wrong point. And we proved to them that the whole thing was erroneous because they started at the wrong baseline. But to answer your question, we have utilized these structures to show that there is fault by the federal government on our erosion, and if they were to dredge at Kings Bay or out the channel, they're starving us of sand. And so they've accepted that premise, and over time, that's why we've been successful in getting done what we've gotten done. So, and as far as the growing is concerned, the growing that Al's talking about, 1,600 feet out in the water, we got sued over that. And we were sued by every environmental group you could ever think of, even the thing called the Surf Boys of America or something, the Surf Riders of America. We had all the other known environmental groups, Audubon, all of them sued us. And they had an engineer who testified erroneously after 4 days of our presentation of our case with our great experts, Eric Olson and Associates. They put on an expert, and he had the wrong permit. We had an amended permit that he hadn't read, because those those jetties out there that we placed in the growing that we placed, it was designed so that sand slips through them and goes and doesn't starve the foraging area of the pilted plover. Now, you weren't concerned about the pilted plover, but they were quite concerned, and we won the case. We dismissed it because their expert had the wrong number. Now, when we saved the park, we saved 210 species of birds, nesting area, and the poor pilted plover is still doing okay. So I've given you too lengthy of an answer, but yes, we have that structure has been a tremendous help to us because, as you know, and I'm talking about layman stuff here, not about, I certainly wouldn't ever think I could be as scientific as Al is, but you know, it's called shadowing of sand. So that when the sand's moving, the littoral drift's moving down towards the growing, and it hits it, it sets back a reverberation and causes the sand to drop. The water drops the sand, and it builds up. That's called shadowing. And that we've been very successful at that. We got 65 acres of sand down there, a beach we never had before, because of that growing and that breakwater. So certainly, if you put those further down the beach, you'd get more and more of that. But at the current time, and we've looked at the money part, it is just not cost-effective at all to do that. That was $12 million to build those two structures down there. Of course, we greatly benefited from a good friend of mine, Jim King, who was president of the Senate from Jacksonville, and Jim got us to $12 million. So that's why we are. And I'm sorry to take up so much
Thanks, buddy.
time. I just want to give you a layman's perspective about that, okay?
There was another question. Bill?
Drew, I'd just like to ask you, the people that haven't received their packets, they would raise their hand and hold it up until I can get to them. I'll provide them my business card. They can call or email me or
Okay.
write the information on the back. So
Okay, but okay, please do that.
we have a
But
speaker
I
over
want
here.
to
when
move
you're
on
ready.
these questions, though.
Yeah, I have a question for Al, I guess. And I
Where that's
was wondering what type of modeling or what type of impact studies you've done on the proposed new channel that you're talking about for the collection of the sand. What would that have on storm surge or tidal surge back here in the marsh on Walker's Creek, on both sides, the east side, the south side and north side? And would that be creating a situation where the tidal surge would actually be enhanced or exacerbated because of the new channel?
Yes, the slide that I showed there briefly, the numerical modeling slide, one of the reasons we did that was to look at that very thing, was to study what's called the tidal prism, the volume of sand that comes in and out of the inlet on any given tidal cycle. When we propose to look at the channel, that's one of the concerns, is that you can imagine if you open it up too far, you invite more water in than what previously came in. So part of what we study there along the bridge, which is all landward of where this work is going to occur, we run the numbers, we run what's called ADCP surveys to actually measure the currents coming in during tidal cycles. By opening up this channel, because the channel does not extend through the bridge and up into the estuary, we are only opening up another pathway across the ebb shoal. So it actually lessens the flow in certain other areas of the ebb shoal, but has no measurable effect on the difference in the amount of water that actually comes into the inlet. Passing the bridge is sort of the local landmark. So we wanted to make, for the reasons you raise exactly, we want to make sure we don't increase the tide range coming into the estuary, because we don't want to create any more of a problem than you already have back here. So yeah, that's what the numerical model does. The model itself is called Delft 3D. I don't know, get into the nuts and bolts of it, but it does quite a few things, and that's one of the big areas we look at. What are the tidal elevations with our project and without our project?
We have another question, this gentleman here.
I'm Walton Rogers. I think this is on, yes. And I'm concerned about the turtles. You mentioned something about provisions we made for the turtles. According to Google, the first turtle hatched on Amelia Island, the first turtle nest on Amelia Island was May the 9th in 2018. And I'd want to make sure that there's some provision. What is your provision for satisfying these turtle needs? And I'm hoping you're not going to leave it up to the contractors, because they have a different objective than we do.
Bill, do you want to answer this one?
Is it going to be monitored, in other words?
Yes, there will be. My understanding there is. Bill?
I'm sorry, I wasn't really
It has to do
listening.
with the turtles.
You want me to get it?
Yeah, you got it?
I got it.
Oh, he's got it,
I
never
got
mind.
it. Yes, sir. Very, very important question. Both of the permits that we will get, the DEP permit and in particular the Army Corps of Engineers permit, will have terms and conditions, several pages worth, that relate directly to the protection of nesting sea turtles and the nests themselves. We build in sea turtle nesting season, as Drew mentioned, for economic reasons, but also for just straight constructability reasons. But what we will do starting the beginning of nesting season, and I'm an engineer, not a biologist. I don't touch anything living because it never turns out well for me. We have Amelia Island Sea Turtle Watch, the folks who do the monitoring every year here. We coordinate and contract with them to do daily surveys beginning before nesting season starts. We give them the schedule of where our dredge operation is going to be down the beach, so they'll know where we're going to be working and where they can go. And they will look every morning for sea turtle nests. And if they find one that is within the range of our work for 70 days, that's how long they give them for the gestation period and hatching out of the nests, they dig them up and relocate them. There are places down in Amelia Island State Park that are allotted for permission to relocate nests. There are places up north of our project where they can relocate nests. This is what the exact process that was done in 2011 when we did the last renourishment. They relocated, I want to say something on the order of 30 nests that we got during that particular season. The relocated nests actually do very, very well. There are very strict guidelines. You got to dig them up that day. You got to get them placed that day. They do very, very well because they get placed in planned strategic areas that, particularly nests that get laid too close to the water's edge, might not last the season. Well, we don't have that problem because they'll relocate them and place them in a safer area. But yes, there are quite a few precautions that are taken for sea turtle nesting. We are allowed to pump at night within a very specific and short range. Typically, each day, the contractor works and presses down the beach to a certain point, and then they kind of hunker down with a plan to work overnight only in a very specific area. They have monitors overnight, and if a turtle comes up in their work area, and it's like Murphy's Law, I've had it happen on just about every project I've worked on, they have to shut down. They have to stop. They have to call the Turtle Patrol folks. Turtle Patrol will come and watch, and they'll relocate the nest. So there are precautions taken for nighttime operations as well. It is a bit of a two-edged sword. I mean, you as a collective community, when that dredger shows up, you want them to go as fast as possible. Get in, get out, go home. Get off your beach, get out of your way, stop making noise, don't do anything. But you do have to deal with the turtle nest issue, and that's how they deal with it.
Somebody else is monitoring at night as the dredge operation.
No, it's part of the Amelia Island Sea Turtle Watch folks. I mean, I've never had it happen, never had a problem, and it's a big, big, big deal.
Hi, I'm Kate Lagar. I live at 24 Salt Marsh Drive, and I want to return to the issue of beach access and what Jeff brought up. And I agree, I've been a supporter of SAISSA since I moved here in 2002. I live west of A1A, so that's relevant to what I want to talk about. I agree with you, Drew, that it's not SAISSA's job to solve the beach access problem. Your job is to make sure we have a beach. What I do take issue is, it isn't within your responsibility, is you're using a formula for the assessments that's 25 years old, if I understand correctly, excluding the commercial part. And my issue is I moved here in 2002, and I was also here in 2011. Beach access in 2002, and I live west of A1A, was radically different than it is today. And to use an assessment that's 25 years old based on beach access patterns that were available then versus now, I think is not fair and equitable. Now, we could get beach access solved and then maybe we could go back to the formula. But I don't think that using the formula that SAISSA is using now represents a fair and equitable formula for those of us that don't live on the beach. The two things that have happened that, in my view, have been since 2002 at least, which is when I moved here. You had the bankruptcy, and out of that came a lot of action between the resort and the club to restrict beach access dramatically. The second thing that happened is a number of condos along the beach restricted beach access dramatically. Now, when I want to walk my dog late in the day on the beach, I can't get there unless I park illegally in a condo parking lot. And so why should I be paying the same proportionate amount that I paid in 2002 and 2011? That's my question for the SAISSA board, and I think the assessment formula is in your purview.
Thank you, Kate. Kate, am I still here? First of all, the assessment is not based on access. you confused me a little bit. The assessment, the neighborhood methodology, first of all, was developed 25 years ago. It's reviewed every time we do a renourishment to make sure that it still produces a fair and equitable allotment to the people that live in those areas. But it's based, excuse me, on the protection of the market value of those houses. Not has anything to do with whether the people living in those houses can get to the beach. It's strictly to do, we think that the market value is impacted more so by if you're on the beach, because you have the waves and the wind and everything else. And so therefore you ought to pay more for that protection and all the way through. And that's why we got those neighborhoods. And it's interesting, I asked the guys this year, you know, you've used this model, you keep coming back and saying it's the right model, do me a favor and go to other beaches and see what they use, so on. And his interesting, after him doing that, he came back and said, it's interesting, Drew, they use us as the model for what they're doing. So that gives me a little bit of a good feeling that what he's doing is, even though it's 25 years old, is still the appropriate, you know, methodology to use in this case. So again, Kate, the assessment that we develop has nothing to do with the access to the beaches. It has strictly to do with the impact of what a storm could do to the market value of your house located where it's located, if that makes any sense at all. But we'll talk about it as a board. We'll bring all that stuff up, and we'll make sure everybody's happy. Okay, now, yes, is that Ron?
I'm Ron Cheeley. I live in the residence, and this is a technical question for Dr. Browder. When we moved into our home in 2015, our boardwalk was level with the beach. And then we had Irma and we had Matthew. And now Mother Nature has created like a 5-foot dune, a dune line along there. And then there's another smaller dune line that's being created. That appears to be a very positive thing from a standpoint of protection of the home. I guess I'm just curious, how did that dune form? Because it was not there in 2015.
What you'll see, particularly in your stretch of the beach and in a little bit down towards the sanctuary, when Matthew, in particular when Matthew occurred, in the picture that was shown in the presentation, there was a great deal of overwash from the storm. A lot of the sand that was on the dry recreational beach berm, which even after 5 or 6 years when Matthew hit, was still in its engineered shape. A lot of that sand got shaved off during the storm. A lot of it was deposited offshore or out of our limits, but a lot of it was also deposited over top of the existing sea oats that were there. So that is actually a positive thing for the upper portion of the beach, while it's a sacrificial thing for the engineered portion of the beach. And this is actually a pretty common problem that beach nourishment projects have all over the Southeast, really. If you have a mature project that's been built once or twice and you're in the maintenance business, as we are now, what you eventually get is the upper portion of the beach grows sea oats, nice pictures, looks great, gets higher in elevation, which is fantastic for protection against storms. But the recreational beach still continues to erode at its typical annual average rate. We're not doing anything to affect the wave climate offshore, so that erosional stress is still there, but the upper part of the beach has benefited nicely. So eventually we get the sea oats that grow out, the dunes then grow because those sea oats capture windblown sand, they capture overwash sand in storm events too. But then the recreational beach continues to retreat back at normally its typical rates. So what you get is a real compression of the recreational space in between, but the beach gets narrower and narrower and narrower. The dunes do grow. They're there for when, you know, the next Matthew or the next event occurs, so you'll get some added bonus protection there as well.
Yeah,
But the important thing to take away here, the net volume, we as engineers doing beach nourishment projects look at the overall volume of sand that's in the system. The net volume still continues to operate on that typical annual average erosion rate. But yeah, we do have the upper part of the beach has been enhanced dramatically.
Yeah, at high tide, we really don't have much beach at all.
Well, and that's where you start to see that compression of the space. But the dunes are the big benefactors. You don't want anybody playing in there, obviously. One of the other downsides of this for birds and other habitat, the birds don't particularly like the vegetated areas because you can't see. So they don't see what's hiding in the vegetation either. So they get compressed a little bit in their space as well.
Okay, Ron? Any more? Another question? Richard?
Richard DeFaro. I actually live in Osprey Village, which doesn't benefit directly from the beach renourishment, although as members of the community it does. Drew, this is a wonderful presentation. Each of you has done a terrific job. I was wondering, will the slides be available on your website?
I think they're already on the website.
They
Yep.
are?
Will be in about 48 hours.
48.
Okay.
Plus a live stream of this.
And then I had a question on when is the snapshot taken of how the costs are allocated? I mean, you go through essentially an adjustment of the just value in the fall. So if you're doing a 2021,
Yeah.
do you,
Bill, when is the property appraiser used for the just value? What's the list? The roll? The tax roll?
We use whatever role the county has at the time, so they modify their role throughout the year, reappraising properties. They don't do the entire county or the entire area of the south end of Amelia Island at the same time they do areas. And over a period of time, they adjust all of the values. And of course, just value is used because when you pay your taxes, if you homestead your property, you're paying a different rate than if you don't homestead your property. So to be fair to all property owners, several years ago, the board decided to use just value, which is the market value of property, which is determined by the property value. So whatever is on the property appraiser's website, the time we do the assessment is the number that's used.
and then
Did I answer it?
Drew,
Yes?
I was wondering, roughly, it looks to me like beachfront pays 100% if you use that as your standard. East, but of A1A, but not on the beach, is about 85%. And on the marsh side is 75%. Is that the approximate
Could
discounts?
be. I don't know. But
Are the
that's
formulas,
our goal. Our goal is to have them pay more, yes.
okay.
I don't know what the percentage
Is the formula available to the
Yeah,
community?
anything is available to anybody. so-
Can you publish it? And
Yeah,
also
it's-
publish how is the commercial?
Well, there's
calculated?
hang on. We have all the slides in this deck, right?
Should be in the back.
Yeah. Hang on.
You have to bring it up on,
I don't?
go ahead and go through.
Yes, it should be right here. Hang on. These are slides that, you know how you keep slides in the back? That's kind of a neat slide.
I think it should be in there.
I know it is, but I'm looking at these slides. Aha! That's the formula.
And how does it work for commercial?
Same way.
So
Same way. It's updated annually by neighborhood, commercial units treated as equivalent residential units, wherever the commercial is located. Most of the commercial's on the beach. Certainly, Omni's mostly on the beach. They do the greatest percentage of the allocation to commercial is Omni. I mean, significantly greater.
so it's the just value of the Omni oceanfront property.
Yeah. And then you do 60% on a base rate. And somebody had asked me, but it was a question by email, as to why the amounts are not proportioned to each other. And I don't know if this is, if you look at what's in the oceanfront, west of A1A and east of A1A, they're not proportional, because the first cut of the way we do the calculation is that you take 60% and you allocate it among everybody. Bill, am I saying that right?
Yes.
Yeah, among everybody. So everybody gets the same, I think it's like $345. So every house, no matter where you're located, gets a base rate of $345. And then it builds up from there, depending upon where you're located and the market value of your house. But that's essentially how this thing works. So, Richard, we get this, the board gets the final calculation, and we get a copy of everybody's property, and we can go through and I know I do, and I'm sure Bill does, and other board members probably do, at least for their house. They go through and they do the calculation. But you're welcome to, you can use my house as a calculation.
There's a judgment in how you're doing the allocation between oceanfront,
Yeah.
east of A1A, and the marsh side. And the point that Kate was making is that that judgment is not just value, because just value is simply the
No, it's
baseline
location.
formula. It's location.
Yeah.
And location is also relevant to beach access. So if the value of your home is affected by your beach access, then SAISSA needs to use some judgment whether the formula that was used 25 years ago is as relevant today where there's been restriction on beach access. That's the question that Kate is putting to this SAISSA board and asking whether or not it doesn't need to be reevaluated in light of the restrictions that have been put on access to the beach contractually by the commercial property owners, Omni and the club, and by condos which have closed off beach access. The Dunes Club pool and beach access is gone for anybody anymore unless you're an owner of those condo units. So I think the important question for SAISSA is, does that need to be reevaluated in light of today's restriction on beach access?
I can do two things. One, I don't think it has any impact whatsoever in the, and I know we keep saying it's a 25-year-old method, but it's a method that at least the people who do this, and they're independent people, this economic study, believe is the best method to achieve, if you go back to the MSBU, a fair and equitable distribution. And whether you use 60, 40, 70, 15, that's just the methodology to get to what you said earlier, 100, 75, 50, whatever the numbers that you used. But I will do this. I will talk to the guy who does this because it's him, it's not us. And I will mention this access issue to him and see if he believes that there should be any additional refinement as a result of restrictions on access to the beach from some of these other areas, from these areas. I will do
Drew.
that.
Drew,
Bill?
might I add that the market conditions of the property really are that adjustment. If Kate, living in her house on Salt Marsh Drive, feels it's worth less, she sells it for less, then that's how that factor is taken into consideration in the model and the economic value of the properties.
Good one, Bill. Thank you. And
Ken Dewey, Shipwatch. It's very interesting. I keep hearing about access to the beach. Yet, just south of the plantation, before you get to the residence and the rest, is a Nassau County beach access. It has a very nice parking lot. It has a walkway over the sand dune. I have looked at that every July 4th for the last 3 years. There's always parking space available. I really don't understand the big problem to the south. Now, if you want to go where Omni is, that's another story. They've blocked you off.
yeah, thank you for your comment. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think we've heard enough about access questions, but thank you for that additional comment. Are there any other questions related to what we're doing here?
I do. Kim Atchison, Captain's Court. I have two questions. The assessment, how many years is that anticipated to be on the tax bill?
9 years?
And the second one is, this is all predicated upon getting 50%, better than 50% approval from the county.
Yes.
What kind of challenge? I'm a new owner here. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is this going to be tough? 50 plus sounds strong to me.
Last year, we stopped counting when we got to 50, last renourishment, we stopped counting when we got to 50.1. So we don't really know, how many would have really voted for it. My gut reaction is that we have about 2,600 voting members. I say voting, but petition signing people. To get 1,300 plus, I think it's something we gotta be concerned about. I think that's why we do meetings like this, why we send out lots of literature. Is it keeping me up at night? No, but I do worry about it, and I want to continue to, say the word as to why we're doing what we're doing. But at the end of the day, I think we'll get it. I do. I've heard a lot of good, positive things. I'm hoping that the meeting is not full today, because there's all these other people that said, yeah, we support it, we have no questions, we have no problems, and they stayed home in the rain. So I feel good about this. Any other question? Oh my goodness, a neighbor. Hi, Jack.
I just want to thank yourself and the team for, over the years, your predecessors as well. I know Norm and many others, Bill, have been involved in behalf of the community. I hope we continue to support aggressively the actions on a timely basis, and I thank you.
Well, thank you, Jack. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Carl Anderson, I live over at Oak Point. One of the obvious questions that keeps getting put off someplace, those of us that do live on the other side of the new freeway that's coming through here, I would sort of suspect that someone would be working on an improvement to beach access. And what I'm hearing here is that it's like a pass-off to a pass-off. Someone asks a question and you're not responsible. Someone over here, and that's not responsible. And we live over here, and how do we get to the beach? We don't take our car to go to the parking lot. We walk down the end of the court, and we view there no passage, unless you walk about a quarter mile, not much, but you can do it, I could do it. But there is no access unless you go into the beach lot, not the beach, but the park lot down there. And meanwhile, I support the erosion effort. Don't misunderstand me. I come from Virginia Beach. I lived on the ocean for 20 years. I recognize the erosion problem. I recognize all that. But we also had a beach access in every block. And I'd like to point out that up in Fernandina, you also have beach access provided by the city that runs down all the way along. People have an easy access to the beach. I remember during my real estate days, followed my Navy days, but I was selling a place that was a condo, and we had access to the bay, and I had to take someone down there to walk them to the bay because they couldn't find the area. But down here, the ocean is a big deal. It's a big deal. I live on the golf course. I love that. That's a big deal too. But nevertheless, the access to the ocean is going to become more and more important. And who's ever supposed to be working on it should be working on it. And there should be a reciprocal plan that you can put up. And these are all of the access points that we have going over to that area.
Well, thank you for your comment. The only piece of that comment that I didn't like is your comment about passing off the question. The question was answered from the standpoint that it is currently not SAISSA's responsibility to deal with access to the beach. It's the AIPCA's responsibility.
I'm sorry.
And those comments should be directed to the AIPCA, not SAISSA.
I didn't directly, you took it that way.
I did.
It's all a matter of perspective. It's all a matter of perspective. It's our money, it's our beach.
It is.
And it's our organizations. And I'm standing here because I've sat here now an hour and a half, and nobody has answered that question, or there's no plan.
Because there's no answer. There's no answer to that question from SAISSA. There is an answer from the AIPCA and Sanctuary and those people, but there's no answer. I did say I would go back and talk to the board about us to take that into consideration when we develop the formula, But that's as far as we can go. It is not our responsibility, sir.
I'm not questioning your responsibility or your approach to the thing. What I'm really saying is that we're being assessed a value. The people on this side are looking at it, at least from my perspective, looking at it, okay, I understand that. And we have other people here that are representatives. They don't have any plan. We faced 30 years, as
I
you
sense
use
your
as an
frustration.
example.
I do.
And
What-
then, no, but wait. 30 years later, what we've seen is a reduction of access to the beach. And 30 years later, the price has gone up and up and up to provide the beach. And so as an end result, I understand your
Okay,
perspective.
I sense your frustration, I do, but we're going to move on. Oh, okay, we don't need to get into that. Actually, what you should do, Tom won't like this, what you all should have done that have concern over the beach access, and it's a valid concern, and I do agree with that, is you should have withheld your payment on the $1,450 that you're paying to the AIPCA. If you want to make a statement, make the statement to who's got responsibility for it. Not to us, but to them. I'm sorry, Tom, I wasn't going to say it. And they just kept blasting me. I know. I'm sorry, Tom. Okay, are there any more questions? No, thank you all so much for coming. I do appreciate it. Thank you.